Hello, could you present yourself and let me know what is WordPress for the people who doesn't know what WordPress is?
Sure. My name is Salomon. I'm a growth engineer at Automattic, and WordPress is the easiest way to make a website, blog, store, whatever you want to do.
Okay, and what is exactly Automattic compared to WordPress? Because everybody knows WordPress, but nobody knows really what is Automattic.
So Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, the open source project, started a company a couple years after WordPress called Automattic. We're a for-profit company, all the normal stuff, and we run WordPress.com, which is a hosted service for creating WordPress sites. We also build a couple other things in the WordPress ecosystem, like Akismet, VaultPress, PullDaddy, a lot of stuff around publishing.
And is this service is free, or do you have to pay? Because WordPress is completely free, the CMS, but I know you're hosting things and you're paying some plugins?
Yep. So most of our products are like freemium. So you can sign up for a free WordPress.com site, and then we sell custom upgrades for like domain names or custom design, things like that. Akismet is free for personal users, and businesses have to pay. So most of our stuff you can start using for free, and then there's sort of upgrades and add-ons.
PullDaddy, could you talk about a little more about this add-on?
Sure. So PullDaddy is like a polls and surveys service, and there's a WordPress plugin. So if you want to like do quizzes on your website or surveys, things like that. And again, there's a free tier, and then if you want more responses,
I think it's a few hundred per day or something like that, and then it's a few euros per vote.
Yeah, I think it's like 100 or 1,000 a month, or 1,000 responses a month, and then you get like unlimited for I think it's like $100 a year, something like that.
Could you let me know how many users there is for WordPress, WordPress.com, and for a few plugins like PullDaddy and so on?
Sure. So WordPress total between WordPress.com and self-hosted, we think there's around 60 or 70 million sites. It's hard to know because it's open source.
Yeah.
On WordPress.com, we have about 30 million, so it's sort of like half and half.
30 million for WordPress.com, which is the hosted version, free version.
Exactly. And then for plugins, Akismet has many millions. That's probably the biggest one of the plugins that we make. Jetpack, which is another sort of new plugin we launched last year, has I think about 1.5 million users. I don't know how many PullDaddy has or some of the other ones, but those are the biggest ones.
And for Jetpack, I know it's more and more integrated on the new integration self-installation of WordPress. What is the aim exactly of Jetpack?
So the aim is basically to make the features we've built on WordPress.com available to anybody. So things like email subscriptions or stats that depend on a service behind the scenes that are a little bit harder to do in a self-hosted environment because you'd have to configure your server to work correctly. Basically to bring that stuff that we've built on WordPress.com as really easy as there to self-hosted users if they want to use it on their sites.
Okay. We're talking about website hosted by someone. Do you know how to optimize a WordPress blog? Because WordPress, when you add more and more plugins, it's begun to be quite hard to make it quicker and quicker. What are your best practice you would do on a blog to make it quicker?
So there's no secret number of plugins. You can have 100 plugins and it can work just fine. The key is really quality. You can have one bad plugin versus 100 good plugins, and the bad plugin is going to kill your site just as fast as anything else. In terms of optimizing, there's a couple sort of best practices, I guess. One is using Nginx, which is a sort of competitive web server to Apache, which is what most people use.
It's a service, but you can download. Is it a plugin?
No, it's a web server. So it's like instead of Apache serving your website, there's a sort of newer, kind of lighter, faster one called Nginx, which we use on WordPress.com and most sort of high-performance sites use. There's a couple really good caching plugins out there. One is called WP Super Cache is one that's very popular, W3 Total Cache, and then we use one on WordPress.com called Bat Cache, which works a little bit differently, and it's also really powerful. So you should definitely be using a caching plugin. You should definitely think about every time you install a plugin, think about the quality of it. Maybe you can't read the code necessarily, but look at the author, see if they're updating it, see if they have other plugins. So try to get some clues about how high quality the code is that you're running.
Okay. Great. You told me just before that there was a new version of WordPress just released. And what are the new features?
Yep. So it was WordPress 3.4 released about a week ago. The biggest new feature is something we're calling the theme customizer. So typically, or historically at least, you would go to like your settings page for your theme, and there'd be some options. It might be like your color or text or background or things like that. And the sort of flow would be save and surprise, we call it. So you'd change some options, you'd hit save, and then you'd run to the front of your website and look at it and make sure it looks okay. Pretty bad experience. So what you have now is when you go to any of those customizations, you sort of load the front end of your site in one pane, and then on the side you get all of your options. You can actually kind of test it in real time, and so you don't have to make any changes until you see what they look like. So it's a really kind of powerful way to customize your site for people who are just using the default options in the themes. So that's the big new feature. A lot of performance improvements, a lot of bug fixes. But yeah, theme customizer is sort of the big one going forward. And the idea was just to make it easier for people to customize what their site looks like, which is what we hear time and time again is what people love most about WordPress.
Okay. You were talking about selling products on the website. What would you propose to someone who wants to sell products on the web using WordPress? Is it some plugins you would propose firstly?
Yeah, there's a couple e-commerce plugins that people seem to like quite a bit. One is called Shop, S-H-O-P-P with 2 Ps. WP e-commerce is another one that I hear a lot about. I haven't used any of them myself firsthand, but I have a lot of friends who have built sites with them, and those are the two that I think people tend to like the most.
Okay, and for optimizing the SEO for website, what plugin do you recommend?
So a lot of that you get out of the box with WordPress. Like a lot of the SEO stuff is just already well, so there's 2 reasons. One is that WordPress has been around a while, we've iterated. The other is that there's so many WordPress sites out there that Google just gets pretty good at indexing that stuff. A couple of things I would probably recommend. One is a sitemap plugin, so to do like an XML sitemap. There's a couple good ones. I think I use one called like Google Sitemaps. And then there's a couple SEO plugins. There's a developer called Yoast, Y-O-A-S-T.
WordPress, it's the most SEO or WordPress SEO.
Yep. So he makes a couple SEO plugins. He's also really involved with the WordPress community, so he's sort of the one that I trust the most on that stuff. So I would say check out his plugins. He has a really good website on it too.
Okay. For the last question of this interview, could you let us know what are the future for WordPress? What is planned for the next version?
So we haven't planned the next version yet. The 3.4 just came out. So usually they take about a week or 2 before they really get heavy into the next version. I think the things that are really important in sort of the WordPress world right now are customization is one, and obviously 3.4 is the first step there, or a step. More flexibility. So you see WordPress doing more and more, right? It's not just a blogging system. People use it as a CMS. People use it to do e-commerce. You see people now using it sort of as an application framework. So people building like job sites on WordPress.
Yeah.
Really sort of, bending it to be more and more flexible. And so I think that's definitely something that will be more and more supported going forward. Like really thinking a lot about how WordPress works for those use cases. I think those are probably the two biggest things, and obviously just continuing to make it performance improvements, bug fixes, all the things that are always done. But customization and sort of flexibility, I think, are the 2 big themes. And then mobile is another one where we're working on making the WordPress admin more and more useful on mobile devices and things like that.
Okay. For having more information about, for example, a theme of WordPress, what kind of sign do you recommend? Is it a WordPress theme? Is it a theme forest?
To get themes, I tend to like themes that are open source. Or themes that are free and open source and sort of as available as possible. So the first place I usually look is the WordPress.org repo for themes.
There is some theme, but they are quite, for me, I think they are quite limited. There's nice ones, for example, for my blog, enterprise.marketing.com. I use a Superman theme, which is quite nice, but I think it's quite limited. But if you want to buy a theme quite original, to be different, on which website would you buy it?
I'm a big fan of the Genesis framework, which is by Studio Press.
Yeah.
That's probably the one that I would recommend most. But honestly, I haven't necessarily seen a high correlation between how much a theme costs and how good it is. I think there's very good themes that are free. I think there's very good themes that cost money, and there's very bad themes that cost money. Obviously, there's very bad themes that are free. It might be sort of an easier way to filter the field and see, find themes you like, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're going to be better or look better or work better than free themes just because they cost money. So, still do your research, make sure that don't just assume that it's good because they charge for it.
Okay. And is there some website that you would recommend to visit if you want to have more information? Maybe your blog, if you have a own blog, of course,
Sure.
on WordPress?
My site is evansalomon.me. And I actually write quite a bit about WordPress. The WordPress Stack Exchange site, so wordpress.stackexchange.com is a really good Q&A forum. WordPress.org has forums. I definitely look there for any plugins that you downloaded there. those are probably my top 3 places I would go.
Okay. And if you want if you want more information about you, you said just before your address for the website is
evansolomon.me. So EVANSOLOM.
Okay.
Yeah, SOLOMON. Can't spell my own name.
No problem. I will take your name and put it in the interview.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.